let's kick it off.
All right, let's kick it off. Welcome, everyone. We're excited today to have a chat about 2026 planning. We find ourselves here in December. Everything is getting crazy busy. We're buying presents, we're doing all these things, and then somewhere in the back of our mind, we're like, I know that my business has to be ready for 2026. So, as we were chatting about this with Ben and Joe from Good Measure, who you'll hear from in a little bit, we just were like, man, how do you plan well for 2026? And the thing that came to mind was you really have to understand your numbers from 2025. You have to have clean data that you can understand. You have to know how those numbers connect. There's also your business in 2025 was telling a story, right? So we're, even if you don't love numbers, you might love story. And to say your business was telling a story, like for the better, for the worse, some good things, some hard things. And so how do you understand the story that your business was telling in 2025? How do you pull out what you need from that story and then use that data to strategically plan for 2026? So that's where we're going to be going today, and we'll talk a little more about that. But before we do, we just wanted to introduce ourselves and just say kind of who we are, why we're even in this conversation. And then also, we just wanted to invite you, if you have any questions while we're talking, any thoughts, just drop them in the chat. We'll try to be watching that, and we'll try to find a good time to just kind of answer those questions or talk about those things. So do you want to just introduce us?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm Ben. I'm Brittany's husband. We have 4 kids. We live here in Indiana. I started Amplify about a decade ago, and it was really out of some work I was doing in private equity and sitting down with business owners who were trying to do exactly what we're talking about today, which was look ahead to the future, try to understand what growth might look like. And what I saw so often was how frustrating it was to feel like you're guessing around making some of these big decisions in your own business. And so really at the heartbeat, the origin of starting Amplify, it was coming alongside business owners who are in this spot where you're kind of at the turn of a year and starting to look ahead. And we just love equipping and helping bring some clarity and insight to business owners who are making these big decisions. So I have a background in music, and that's why you see the guitars behind me. But yeah, we're excited to be here today with the Good Measure crew. So Joe, I'll hand it off to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you literally have a background in music. Dad joke. I'm joining from upstate New York, visiting some family. I'm currently in my grandma's house, like hovered around the modem. So hopefully my video comes through fine. Ben and I started Good Measure about 5 years ago. We have 25 years experience between the two of us. I haven't counted up our whole team, but it has to be over 100 years experience across the 10 of our team members. But we love working with business owners. We love helping them see the story of their books. And we've really enjoyed working with Ben Cooper and Brittany on partnering with businesses to help them see out into the future beyond just what happened in the past and extending into the future. I have 3 young kids. They're all boys, 8, 6, and 4. They keep me on my toes. When I'm not looking at P&Ls, you can find me going for a hike in the Smoky Mountains. That's me.
Yeah. And I'm Ben Curtis. So we've got plenty of Bens here for you today. Business partners with Joe in Good Measure. Yeah, we love serving organizations, nonprofits and for-profit businesses with the day-to-day finance function. So we're in the finance ops with people day in and day out. And what we get excited about is having conversations around, so what? Why do numbers matter? Who cares? Why is this relevant and valuable for your business? And so very natural friendship and partnership with Ben and Brittany because they love this story as well. Also have 3 young kids. And we are excited to chat with you all today.
Awesome. Love it. Well, maybe let's set the stage real quick, and then I'll hand it off to the Good Measure crew. But as I know, as a business owner myself, like there are a lot of numbers that are kind of moving around. Like when I look even at Amplify's numbers, there's just a lot of data. So I'm excited to hear from you guys too, as you dig in and kind of walk us through what a healthy kind of numbers data system foundation looks like, because we know how important that is when we dive into actually looking ahead of the future and building on that foundation. But maybe if you guys want to start the conversation around kind of what does a good foundation look like?
Yeah, 100%. I'll share my screen here. We love having this conversation and asking this question. So again, from the Good Measure side, the way that we are best equipped to serve folks in the day-to-day finance ops, bookkeeping, payroll, bill pay, what does invoicing look like? How do we have a good story that actually tells the truth, so that you can have a conversation around where are we going when we're planning a future time period? Well, the way that we do that, we really are getting into the weeds on clean financial data. Okay. And so, how we wanted to kick off this conversation today was we're really excited about planning, really excited about making a plan come to life, accomplishing what we're after in our businesses as we look ahead to the future. The only way we're going to do that is if we can trust the inputs, the financial inputs that are actually telling a story. And so, what Joe and I, the specific things we get excited about are setting up a solid foundation for folks. So, you're a business owner, you're leading an organization, and are your numbers reliable? Are your numbers trustworthy? And so, in a little bit, we're going to talk more about like the actual generation and creation of a plan and what that looks like. But this is what has to come first. And so I just want to walk through, like, that's why this matters. We're talking about planning, but we cannot trust garbage in inputs because they're going to lead to garbage out outputs. And so what we've done is we've got a checklist like this. We're actually going to give this away to you all at the end for free. This is just a checklist that you can utilize to ensure, hey, your data is clean, your financial data is clean, your books are trustworthy and reliable. So I'm just going to take 10 minutes or so here and walk through what this looks like. This is something that an actual, accounting practice like Good Measure, we utilize things like this. And so we wanted to walk through, hey, you can just take this, and this is how you can have good storytelling moving forward. Why this matters? Okay, so this matters because what we want to do is have a true holistic story. So every single transaction that actually happens with your business is reflected inside your books. And nothing that didn't happen isn't reflected in your books. So that's what this following a checklist like this would produce. You can make better decisions, stop flying blind, have healthier cash flow. You are protected from gnarly surprises. So if you ever had the IRS or Department of Labor breathing down your neck because you missed a payroll filing or we had to pay penalties on a tax situation, those suck. And so what we want to do is follow a process like this to prevent those type of things. So the first step in cleaning up your financial data or getting, accurate books into QuickBooks Online, if that's an accounting software for you, an accounting system, you have to start with gathering your financial documents and gathering your financial info. Um, and so really what this looks like is like, hey, what are all my bank accounts? What are my credit cards? Think about my revenue cycle. I've got, maybe a point of sale system or an e-com system or some sort of invoicing system. Think about my bill pay and my expenses cycle. Do I have bills that aren't reflected in my financials? Do I have payroll or are there loans or leases or maybe even an entire tax return where there's information that I'm gonna need to get everything caught up? Well, let me gather all that information on the front end. So we start with that. And really related to that, it's make sure you've got online access to those accounts, so like a bank account or an invoicing system, and have some sort of standardized way to store information. So you could set up a helpful and healthy, file structure for moving forward for your bookkeeping team or your accounting team. This is where we retain all our statements. This is where I'm keeping all my inventory information. Um, Really, this is this third step here is be honest with yourself and answer your questions truthfully on when's the last time I really do have complete and holistic accounting data or clean books, okay? Hopefully, everyone here on this chat with us today, November of 2025, you say like, "Yep, that's my last month where I've got clean data because that just happened," right? Sometimes that's not reality though. And so what you want to do is acknowledge I may not have all my financial data. Maybe I've got half of my revenue or a bunch of credit card expenses. I had all those back in December 2024, but I think I need to do some catching up to get all of the financial transactions, everything that happened in real life in my business. I need to account for that inside of QuickBooks Online or whatever your accounting system is. So you need to be honest with yourself and start there. If this is a significant cleanup process, it's okay. You eat the elephant a bite at a time, but it is going to help you to break up these tasks into different sections. Like, what would a bank reconciliation look like? Let me start with that. Well, before I can do that, I really need to start with categorizing all my information, making sure that I have every transaction inside of the books. So establish a good starting point. Once you do that, I don't want to just use accounting language here, but it's actually very important that you can review and standardize what's called a chart of accounts. A chart of accounts in financial accounting language, it's just the buckets or categories for where you put all your transactions. If you look at your P&L and you look at your balance sheet, the words that you see there, they're reflecting your chart of accounts. Okay. So it's just like you've got revenue or payroll wages expense or vehicle assets. And so what you want to do is you want to have simplicity in your actual flow of your chart of accounts, of the names of your buckets. Okay. You want to have simplicity while also having enough detail that actually helps you with decision making. None of this matters if it doesn't help you with decision making, is my personal opinion. And so what you want to do is have like simplicity in your organization, simplicity in your structure with the requisite detail. And let's just real quick chat about a story. Imagine we're a trash pickup business, okay? Very glamorous business. Imagine your trash pickup business, you've got millions of dollars of garbage trucks as assets in your business because that's what you're doing. You're probably doing tons of repairs and maintenance on those trucks, right? Well, what you could do is you could have an expense line item on your P&L for every time you do an oil change. And then you could have another expense line item for every time you do engine work, and maybe another expense line item for every time you do, I don't know, I'm kind of showing that I don't know cars here.
New tires.
Wheels, tires and alignment, fluid top offs, transmission stuff. You've got 7 different ones for repairs and maintenance. Does that help you in your decision making? Maybe not. But now let's turn the table and say, imagine you're a body shop or like a car repair shop, okay? And you've got revenue that's coming from oil changes and engine work and fluid top offs and wheels and alignment. It actually helps your decision making arguably much more significantly to have detailed on I'm going to have a revenue line item for every single one of those bad boys. So the point of that is just to acknowledge where is your data structure helpful for you in decision making. We don't want a 20-page P&L if it doesn't help you for decision making. But we might need some level of detail to actually be able to communicate. No, it's important for us to split out where we're actually sourcing our revenue from. So merge together duplicate accounts you might not need, or very small ones. You could rename for clarity because clarity is kindness. So don't have unclear communication to your internal team and to yourself. Don't just have vague language like apps, make it a tad more clear, like software subscriptions. The point is, you want to align the structure of your chart of accounts with how your business actually earns money and how you actually spend money. One thing that we actually love doing for folks that we serve is building out what we call a visual P&L, which is it's either a narrative or perhaps an actual literal mapping out, a representation of what your P&L looks like. So I've got an example of what that looks like here. Again, we're going to give this away to you all. I have an example where it's fillable as well. You can fill it in yourself. But it's essentially, as you can see here, like just a summary of how does money actually flow and how does data actually flow in this business. It really helps to simplify things. You can start with this and you can go much more broadly as you bring in an accounting team or train a bookkeeper. But this just helps you mind map, particularly certain folks where if your brain is served by this, can mind map like this is where revenue comes from for the business. This is how expenses happen. What are some other key things? Payroll and bill pay. What's some technology that we might use? So a visual P&L can really serve you as you're considering what your books should look like in the flow of your books. Now we get into some nitty gritty here. Okay. So let's actually reconcile all accounts. You can talk to your bookkeeper, your accountant around what this actually looks like. But the point is, we're ensuring nothing is missed that actually happened in reality on a bank account or a credit card or a sales clearing account or a liability account or asset account. There's so many different things you can reconcile. But why this happens is so we have truthful and accurate data. So we reconcile everything. You may need to clean up your accounts receivable and your accounts payable, and really even more broadly than that, your entire balance sheet. So there's this little report that you have for your business. It's called balance sheet. The phrase that we like to say sometimes is that the bodies lay in the balance sheet. There's so many gnarly things from an accounting perspective that are hidden in the balance sheet. You can look at your balance sheet right now if you have access to that, and you can see, is there anything in there that just doesn't make sense? Do we have liability accounts for our payroll that are growing and growing and growing forever and ever? Do we have negative asset accounts? Does it make sense for the trash pickup business to have negative $1 million in trucks on their books? Probably not. So you really want to have cleaned up your balance sheet, but in particular, where this can be helpful is to clean up your accounts receivable, some money that is actually owed to you as a business, and your accounts payable, money that you owe to other organizations. We've got some flow here around, actual reports you could pull to access that information. But at the end of the day, you want truthful and accurate data around what can you actually collect on as a business, like what's reasonable, and what do you actually owe, and what's reasonable. Um, Again, continuing to get everything cleaned up and caught up, what you're going to want to do next is categorize all remaining expenses in some sort of bucket or chart of account category, like we talked about here. You want to categorize them in a logical and consistent and meaningful way. You may have some sort of accounts available to you called uncategorized or miscellaneous or ask my accountant. That does not help you in telling a story because no one knows what that means. And so what you want to do is you want to get things out into some sort of category or bucket that actually is meaningful. Again, we want to get meaningful reports. We want like any sort of deductions from a tax perspective to be defensible and reliable. You would want, as a reasonable person, the leader of your business or the leader of your organization, to be able to review a P&L or other financials, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I can track with that. Generally, this is a story I'm following. Review the rest of your balance sheet, like fixed assets and inventory, get some tax information, kind of whole conversations around sales tax and payroll tax and income tax filings. But at the end of the day, what this allows you to do is have reasonable review or review for reasonableness of, all right, I'm looking at financials here. I might need to make some adjustments. If it doesn't look like it's real life, then you find out why. You dig into like what's still missing here. At the end of all of this, it's pretty wonderful for you to have documented how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? So what does actual good accounting and bookkeeping look like on a regular basis? So I'm not cleaning up 9 months or 10 months at a time moving forward. So you would have this final review, and then what you can do is ask yourself a question. When do I need to call in some big guns? When do I call in a professional? So these are just a few things that you could consider for when does it make sense to say, hey, we should get some outside help here. So if you've got late payroll or tax filings, if you're missing historical data, if you have several months of accounts that aren't reconciled and you just don't know how to get that unwound, or negative accounts, literal negative dollar amounts on those on those balance sheets or P&Ls, those are some red flags that could trigger to you, hey, it could be helpful to bring in a professional here. But we're going to provide this checklist for you. This just serves you in being able to have an internal review of, hey, what's the quality of your data and the quality of your books look like?
That's awesome.
Super helpful. I just had one question for you. As you're going through all this, I'm like, this is so helpful. And I'm so thankful that you guys partner with people to help with this because it is a ton. That's a lot of work.
I got tired just hearing that list.
No, but I'm like, we say all the time, like so many people don't start their businesses because they love numbers. And I know that's why you exist. I know that's why we exist. It's to be a partner in this, right? Because it's a lot. So I was curious for a person who's looking at this checklist and they're like, oh my goodness, I don't even understand. I don't love numbers. The first thing is that it's so wonderful that you guys are there to partner and help and make this easier. And the second thing, you kind of started off at the top talking about why this matters. But I would love to hear from you when you guys are working with clients. Then what does it feel like for someone when these things are actually organized? Like, what do you see in the people that you're working with once they get past some of this and they start to actually have these things organized?
And I'll just add, I saw the opposite of like whatever good feelings you have. Yesterday, I was in a room full of CEOs, and one of them said, guys, our February financials are still not closed out. And that's 8 months ago, 9 months ago. Like,
it's common, right?
And it's a totally normal thing. But I saw the flip side of like it was stressful. He's not sure how to make decisions right now. It's just
that's right.
What do you see in that?
Just anecdotally, what do you see with clients?
Yeah, Joe, why don't you answer that one? What are the goodness that we see with folks?
Yeah, I mean, many times this is the first real diagnostic business owners will do on what for a lot of people is the biggest nest egg in their retirement. This is their blood, sweat, tears, conversations with their spouse over the dinner table. When we go through a diagnostic and a full cleanup project, like we're kind of showing them for the first time, like, here's how it's going. Sometimes it's really good, and the business owner can like take a deep breath and be like, hey, I actually feel like we can take a vacation without me totally stressed out, hoping that we could afford it, now we actually know how we're doing it. It's sort of that you're kind of getting your blood work done on your business to say, like, how are we actually doing it? It can be a really like hopeful time, or we've come across sometimes where we've uncovered that this business is no longer viable in its current state. Like, you're bleeding cash, and you're going to keep bleeding cash until you do something. And maybe you need to get out of this industry, or maybe you need to radically change, but something has to give. And even that can be, while challenging, it can be life-giving to say, like, you're right, I need to make that really hard decision I've been putting off, because you've clearly shown me that it's not working.
Yeah. That's good. Well, Joe, do you want to chat through some next items with folks?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to share my screen and walk through. And this really sets the stage for Amplify on, where do you take your business once you know how it's running? And this is something that Ben and I have done for nearly 5 years. And it's tracking the more detailed metrics in the business. Some of these are financial metrics that you'll get, once you clean up your financials. Some of it is the actual like day-to-day inner workings of your business, but tracking them and understanding your goals is how you know how to adjust midweek. And we're about to go into like, how do I think holistically about 2026? But I'd argue you can't get there until you know how you're actually doing. So this is a metrics dashboard. We'll share this. This is full of example data. What I would encourage you to do is to make a copy of this Google Sheet once you get it, change the columns to match your particular business. Folks like Ben and Brittany Cooper can help you identify which metrics you should track. A good place to start is honestly a ChatGPT or a Gemini or Perplexity or even a Google search to understand what are the metrics that affect your particular industry, and use those as a starting point. And I think you would refine those as you got to know your business better and your goals. One of the things we spoke about as our two teams here is, we talk to business owners that will either totally sandbag their goals because they just want a lifestyle business, so that's okay, or they'll totally just throw out a number. I want to be at $8 million in annual revenue by the end of the year. And they have no idea how they will actually get there. And what happens is you don't actually get there, or you totally blow past your revenue and totally underhire. And you just go year after year after year of the business kind of running your life and you not running your business. And so we would argue track your metrics is where you start. So I want to walk you through this doc. So again, example data, but you can see on the top row here, the specific metric we're tracking. Row 2 is the goal that we've set. And Ben Cooper will get into like the annual planning. How do you break down an annual plan into weekly goals? But here are the weekly goals we set. And then you just plug in the numbers for the week prior. Now, the exercise here is you actually do this. You actually go through the rigor of adding these in. And each one of those, if they are under a goal, should trigger you that you have a problem. You have an issue in your business that needs attention right now. So it's not you're letting it go months and months and months without any attention. You're catching up to these things really quickly. So I won't go through every column here. I just put a lot of examples in here. So kind of in the green is sort of the revenue side of your business. The red is your attrition. Maybe it's callbacks. Maybe it's your cost of goods. Maybe it's your overdue projects. Again, if you're under those or over those, you could be in a good spot. If you've missed them, it's an opportunity to speak. If you're a solopreneur, you can still use these to keep yourself accountable. If you're a smaller team of 2, you can hold each other accountable. If you have a team, like in this example, we might be tracking what is the billable percentage by team member, and is that going to be a manager needs to meet with, in this case, John. He's working too much. And we could see a trend line. If we see John has worked 1 week, 2 hours of overtime, that may be okay if I see weeks and weeks and weeks where I'm on target. But if I start to see this go wildly out of balance here, same with Sue's hours, if she's wildly under her target week after week after week, I have a problem and I need to get out ahead of that. So again, ChatGPT that, understand what your metrics are that you're tracking and do the rigor. I'll go through in the actual Google Doc. It's just the instructions here. I'll skip over the instructions. I think you can read. But I wanted to show this, how your metrics play into each other and making sure you've set good metrics to track. So this is an example of, let's say, you have a goal of 1 sales meeting a week and you've been hitting 3 consistently, but your sales pipeline is not reaching the $10,000 goal that you've set. Those two metrics play together to where it might actually be your network meetings while you're crushing your goal could mean that you're having the wrong kind of meetings. You're not meeting with the right people. You're not meeting with decision makers. Maybe you're going up the wrong industry. So it's not just the one that you're tracking, because you could say, hey, awesome, great, let's keep on spending on coffees and lunches and dinners. But if we're not actually attributing that to the right metric, we could be just wasting a bunch of effort. And so you can do that with all sorts of things. Maybe you're active on LinkedIn and you're posting a lot, but your likes or impressions or website visits aren't going up. You may need to tweak what you're writing. Maybe you work with a content writer to drive more visits to your website. So again, we don't get to those decisions without tracking. So we're giving this doc away as well. I'm going to briefly hit on where that plays out in a meeting agenda. Either it's accountability for yourself or other leaders in your organization. But this is really just how to capture the issues. So we can write in simple issues from the last week. Ben Cooper will get into this, but we can track initiatives. So as we set out our goals for next year, are we making progress? And if we're not making progress, we can surface that as an issue. So in this case, Sue has lack of progress on this maintenance division, because we can see she has self-reported, I just haven't made progress in 4 weeks. I could use a kick in the pants to kind of get me going on this again. So I'll pause there. Want to see if Ben Cooper, Brittany Cooper, or Ben Curtis would have anything to add to this.
Yeah, I think this is really helpful. I mean, we do a lot in the EOS community, and so I think, we're always talking about scorecards and being sort of these weekly activities, and VTOs being like your long-term goals. And then, you have the L10 meeting, which is totally what you're talking about with the issues. So I think I like your idea of really having, like, this is so helpful to see all these things you could be tracking. And then also even just prompting ChatGPT, because it is hard to build a scorecard. It's hard to know what to even track. And it takes so long. I mean, even for us as a business, for so long, you're tracking some of the right things, some of the wrong things, and you're always shifting. So I think it's just so helpful to have a starting place, and then over time to be able to be like, okay, this one's not as important for us, right? Or you just learn as you go. Like, and I love even that visual of like, yeah, sometimes you're putting your time or money into the wrong thing, or just the thing that's not working in that season. So I just think this plays so well in the EOS universe.
Yeah, and it speaks to, I like how this connects to what Ben was just talking about with, you're doing all this hard work to dive into a mess of puzzle pieces, really. I mean, you're trying to organize things. You're trying to get things to a spot where you can then take a next step and start asking questions about the information. And, even you, Joe, you talked about, okay, there are things that happen before revenue shows up on a financial statement, right? There's activity that's happening by the sales team, or, there's an impact of all these metrics that you have laid out here. And that's the opportunity. Once you establish a really good set of data, you can start to interact with it and test
That's right.
questions and try different things. And that's part of the important trial and error process that the entrepreneurial journey invites us into. And so I think this is a really helpful, even then as we turn the page, and we'll talk about, looking ahead 2026, like how does that play out? I think what you all are talking about is like the value of this progressive building upon good numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is so helpful. Looking back at 2025, having clean numbers, I mean, knowing what to pull out, knowing what to track, And I mean, I just encourage anybody to reach out to you guys, because this is not easy stuff, especially if you're trying to run a business and you're trying to, do all the things that entrepreneurs are doing. This is a lot, so I'm glad that you guys are available to help with these things too. But I think from there, we've kind of said, okay, how do you look back? How do you have good data? What do you pull out? What are you tracking? And then we're going to move into a little more of a picture of how does cash flow through your business. So a lot of the work that we are doing at Amplify is in the future facing picture. So we do a lot of things rooted in forecasts, and really all a forecast is, like, I think often people have this perception that it's like telling the future and you're just guessing, right? Or you're just saying, like, I don't know, maybe we grow 18% next year, or, out of nowhere. But really all that a forecast is a full understanding and a model of how does every piece of your business interact with every other piece. And so when one thing changes, it's almost like we talk about it almost like a simulation. Like you've built a car, right? And you're like, oh, well, when I push the gas, what's going to happen to everything else in the car? And so a forecast is more about everything being connected than about guessing the future. And so we have kind of a model that talks about how does cash even move through a business. And I think it's helpful for planning. It's helpful once you have clean data and once you have those metrics that you're tracking, to have a visual of, like, where do these impact my business? Which person on my team has the most influence, for this metric? So Ben's going to lead a little more into that.
Absolutely. It really is. And I'm going to click over here. This is something that we'll share with everyone. And there's a separate video where I walk through in more detail about kind of what you're seeing here. There's a lot of information on this visual, but like Brittany was saying, this is almost like the next stage now of once we understand, in this metaphor, how water or cash moves through the business, how water flows down this mountain and hits different stages of things like revenue and direct costs, gross profit, like all the steps that you see in the financial statements. And Ben talked about, this is where the bodies are buried, I guess, down in the balance sheet area, but
the field.
But yeah, in the liabilities field. But the goal is to then say, okay, we understand, like Ben was walking through, how the numbers are organized. Okay. And then, like Joe mentioned, now we understand that there are things that we can measure and pay attention to that affect what's happening. Like Brittany mentioned here, there are activities that we should see play out into, and there are different team members who own different parts of what's happening each month in the business. And so if you follow this flow of, okay, there are things we do, there are results that we are going to see play out. When the books close out every month, we should have a clean snapshot of what happened. Like, where is everything, how are dollars flowing through the business, and how effective are we in being profitable and ultimately adding more resources. If you follow the flow of dollars, you can see that really the ultimate goal here, as we go from activities to results and into thinking about the future, is that we have extra water that flows through to, this place we call it Opportunity Pond in this map. That it's really is, a place where we have extra resources where we can make decisions about things we want to do within the business or in life in general. It's basically, how can we build a business that supports a life of meaning, or something that we envision as we think about the future. And so from a high level, what we want to kind of add another angle of everything that Ben and Joe were just talking about is, I'm a visual learner, so I like thinking, okay, and Brittany, not being as financially minded, has really valued seeing, like, okay, so revenue comes in and maybe there's seasonal revenue that's happening. It's like rain coming down, or maybe there's this pump house that we're actually doing the hard work with the marketing and sales to generate revenue. But there's also this recurring thing that happens. It's like a spring flowing that just also contributes water down the mountain. But there's a lot of stuff that can happen between, just thinking about top line. It's one of those deceptive things we can do as entrepreneurs where we say, look how successful we are. Look at how much water is being generated up here in the revenue. That's just, thinking about top line. What we care about is more, think bottom line, and what actually flows into, the resource that is available for us to make decisions, either improvements in the business, paying off liabilities, ultimately having more to do things with that we care about. So that, just from a high level, we want to introduce that picture. Alongside this, we have what we call the year-end planning worksheet. Again, something we're going to share with you all, and it's introducing some thoughtful questions. It's similar to like a VTO if you run on EOS, where it's an invitation to think about what am I hoping the next year could look like. So it really actually starts with that question. This is kind of in reverse. We like going left to right, but from the visual, if we just think with the end in mind first, we want to begin with that pond, that little cabin. Like, what are we hoping, life could look like, and what we would be able to enjoy, especially as business owners, and we're thinking about what the future could provide for us. What are we hoping that would look like? And it kind of begins qualitative, because we want to just understand and allow ourselves. I think, being in that room yesterday, and I'm not going to name names of who the business was who was saying February was the last time we had any books closed out. He is living a pretty stressful life right now from a decision-making standpoint. And, it's that's a qualitative experience he's having, and so what we want to recognize is that there are things that the business can provide, and it's not always just going to be measured in dollars or numbers. It's things that, how much time do I get to coach our kids' basketball teams? Right. And it's the stuff that when we think about a year from now, what are we hoping life could look like? That probably translates at some point into more quantitative information. Like, okay, well, how would that be different from today? If I'm in a spot, just speaking of Amplify specifically, we are in a growth journey ourselves, and I'm wearing multiple hats that I'm excited to continue to add amazing people to the team, so that I get to live fully into the visionary role, where I get to a year from now, that's what I would write down in the answer to number one. I'm excited to be spending time in an area that I feel like I'm thriving in.
Yeah, because people can hit their revenue goals and say, like, I run a $10 million business, but they're not sleeping at night. And those are the kinds of questions that we're interested in, right?
There might be some trade-offs that are required.
But yeah.
And I think also what I want to invite is it's okay if your answers to this are unique to your business. I think it's only okay that that's the nature of how you answer these questions, because what I might say, I hope for in my business, or how I want my business to look a year from now, it should reflect us. We're all human. Like, we don't want to just run our business through some massive algorithm that says, and I'm assuming Good Measure guys, like, as you guys are looking at the data, there's not just some template that you shove everybody's numbers through the same chart of accounts. Like, it's going to be unique. Right. If you're an auto shop, or if you're a bakery, or a law firm, it has to be reflective of who we are as people, who we are as a business. And so the invitation here to start is to say, what am I hoping next year looks like? What needs to happen for that to become a reality? And what specific decisions within the business might I need to be considering that make that a reality? And so that could be new hires that you're thinking about. And I'll click over real quick. I have an example way that I answered this. I'm not going to go through this word for word, but that's included here in the slides. But it could be new hires. It could be, well, we're really trying to grow, so we want to hit these new sales metrics, or there's a new product we're going to launch. We want to buy another garbage truck for our trash pickup, whatever it might be. We want to just list, like, what are the missing pieces between here and there that I need to introduce into the business. Then it's helpful to come back to, what are the results from 2025? What's the shape of, the business currently? I'm going to click back here. How does water run through down the mountain right now? Like, what is 2025? I should be able to look at my numbers and have this in mind to begin thinking about what happened this year, and what am I seeing about the way, cash was moving at each of these checkpoints. What do I like about that? What do I don't like about that? What is confusing? You might drill into things and assets, liabilities. You might be finding things, but the important thing is to look and evaluate and do a little bit of detective work to just say, like, okay, what was happening from a revenue profitability standpoint? What's our break even as a business? Just so we're aware of what needs to happen month over month, so that we are contributing new dollars to, the what happens after just the expenses each month in the business. Where's there room for improvement that we could focus in on? And it's amazing how clear things can become about, oh, there's this opportunity. Once you just look, I mean, it sounds silly, but once you start evaluating the numbers and paying attention, things pop, things rise to the surface, and you start saying, oh, I can't ignore that anymore. We need to focus here and not there. So what we want to do, even before we look to 2026, is get a feel for what was cash flow mountain for 2025. What's that story? That allows us to then say, okay, we have listed a few things that we want to change about the way the business is operating, what the team structure might look like, or new product launches, even new revenue streams that we might be introducing. So how would cash flow mountain look in 2026 if we're investing money here and here and here, or we're launching new products here? And so really, when Brittany was talking about forecasting, it's about just introducing time to this picture. So it's, cash flow mountain is kind of a snapshot. So when we talk about forecasting, we're really almost like scenario planning and looking at different ways the story could play out if we make different decisions. So that's not a felt need if you're a business and you're happy just kind of, I think Ben or Joe, you talked about, you're just kind of at this, like, you're content just doing things the way you've always done it. And that's totally fine. It doesn't hurt if you just say, I'm just going to run 2025 back. 2026, let's just look like 2025. I'm assuming you're not watching this conversation if you're wanting to just repeat 2025. So if you're on some journey of growth or transformation, it requires, what's the saying? It's like insanity is doing the same thing and hoping for a different result. I forget exactly what the wording there is, but
Yep.
This is about, okay, we're going to do something different, so it's going to change how water flows down that mountain. So we need to understand, though, if I want to have peace of mind and if I want to sleep at night, I don't just want to say, well, we got to do something different, so let's swing for the fences and be just super aggressive and make the new hires and invest in that new marketing agency or do a big rebrand or whatever it might be, or let's triple our ad spend budget. That's got to work, right? Really, what is critical is to begin the process of looking ahead with the same model, the same understanding of how dollars flow through the business, but in a sandbox environment, in a safe, it's almost like a GPS for the business where we're kind of like, we know where we're trying to go. What routes do we have to get there? What path is going to get us there the fastest? And so the second part of evaluating the results is beginning to look at, when can we afford to make the new hire that we say is important? When can we afford to launch that new product? What's it going to take, as an initial investment into inventory to begin selling that, physical product potentially? Or if we want to buy another truck or a new assembly line, open a new assembly line, what has to happen from a dollar standpoint ahead of time that we just want to be prepared for, so that we're avoiding surprises and we're not running the business and being constantly reactive, to what we're seeing, or just going on some unnecessary emotional roller coaster every time we look at the financials. Because a lot of times and this is totally normal, you'll get financials sent to you from, and you guys might see this, I don't want you to throw any clients under the bus, but you'll say, hey, last month's books are closed out. They show up in the portal or somebody's email inbox. A lot of business owners, if they even open those financials, will maybe just look at the top and see, like, how was revenue, top line, right? How'd we do? I might scroll all the way to the bottom and look at EBITDA, or just look at, what was our profit after just running the business. That might make me feel a whole lot of things. And then I might open the bank account and just go, okay, I think we're okay.
Yeah.
But there's no practical recalibration happening. There's no meaningful interaction with the numbers that says, to Joe's point, talking about metrics, the final piece of this kind of intentional planning part, looking ahead, we have to come back a step before the financial results and understand who is responsible for what results each month and the performance of the business. So a lot of times, like in EOS, you'll have some different seats like marketing, sales, operations, finance, leadership. You're going to have different areas of, and I'll click back to the visual, you're going to have different areas that you kind of own in this picture. So sales and marketing is going to own really what's happening at the top of the mountain and how, new dollars come into the business. operations might be paying close attention to how efficient we are being with our system and how we're managing, the way that we deliver value to customers. And the finance team and leadership team really has to pay attention to some of those bigger questions about like the receivables and payables, Ben, that you were talking about, where who owes us money and how much do we owe? This is all about like understanding the balance of where things sit and what we might be able to do about that. And so it's not that anybody really has to be in charge of every minute detail. It's really a team effort, but it all comes back to understanding what things can we do that will keep us on track toward these bigger picture goals. So this needs to be broken down into, like Joe was talking through, not just a bunch of numbers that Google or ChatGPT would tell us, like, this is what you should track. We want to make sure that it's actually the important metrics, first of all, that we track. The second and most critical piece of setting these targets, and I'll click over to just show some examples of some metrics that you might track. What is critical, if you use a tool like 90.io or something to kind of look at your scorecard performance every week, there is oftentimes too much liberty or freedom to set what that target number would be every week, where we say, what would be a good week? Well, if we had, 2 sales calls, or if we had, this many demos, or we sold this much product, or whatever. The thing we have to be careful of is not getting tricked into thinking like a good week in 2025 would be this. But if we're really wanting to grow or needing to transform the business, what we have to understand is the performance level that we need to achieve on the scorecard with the sales and marketing team, or the efficiency we need to achieve on the ops side, or the timing of some of the finance decisions. We need to be setting those targets in relationship to the 2026 plan, so that we don't get tricked and go halfway through 2026, we look up and say, I don't know if we're on track to hit our revenue target or our profit target. This was a real conversation I had with an EOS business a few years back, where he said, our sales team is hitting their metrics, like they're winning. But as a business, when I look ahead at the big picture, we're losing. What do we do about that? And so a lot of what this helps set up is the opportunity to let both sides speak to each other and bring those bookends together so that we can understand how we can set targets that are realistic and set performance activity metrics that we think we can hit every week, and they stack up 52 times to put us on track to hit that end goal. So the last thing I want to show is really, what does this look like in practice? I'm going to click over to the tool that we use that we love, that I think every business owner needs a visual way to kind of look at the storylines as you're looking ahead. How can you, if you imagine like these are the storylines, just imagine this is one way that water is flowing through the business in 2026. That's the blue line. Well, if we increased our prices or launched a new product, that might introduce more flow of water down the mountain, and it shows us a different journey that we could go on from a cash perspective. What if there's a drought and the economy is really bad? There are no seasonal rains. What if our costs of actually doing the work and delivering the value goes up? Our cash position is going to struggle. The flow of dollars down that mountain is going to suffer. And so in motion, what we want to be able to evaluate is there's not just one way that this business any of our businesses could play out over the next 12 months. We have agency, we have control, we have the ability to test and hypothesize. And one of the practical ways I think that is helpful to look at is just to show an example of what Ben was talking about with chart of accounts. You've got different revenue streams, you've got different direct costs and expenses. A lot of times, this is the habit that is missing a lot of times that we see in businesses is when we get the financials, we don't know, we're not necessarily comparing those to where we think we should be very easily. So we might be comparing it to the same month last year or last month's numbers, and we call it a map review, really because we want to be comparing our progress on the growth journey to a map where we think we should be. And so MAP stands for measure, adjust, predict. So once we have a forecast created where we say this is what we expect 2026 to look like, driven by these activities, measured by these financial results month over month, leading to these goals, what that sets us up to do is know month after month when Good Measure sends me the financials, I have a really meaningful way to look at those numbers and say, all right, here's what actually happened versus what I thought was going to happen. That's the measure step. There are going to be differences. There's no perfect forecast, right? There's always, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth, I think is what Mike Tyson said. And so we end up with an opportunity, though, to go from the measure step to adjust. Maybe we need to adjust the scorecard activity metrics that we think will be leading to these financial results. So maybe changing something on our scorecard or an underlying assumption in the model. And then that allows us to then zoom back out and predict, where does this put us in the next 12 months if we continue going this way? So we're constantly learning, reiterating, recalibrating, and it allows us to do that final critical step that we can only do in the kind of strategic planning process once you have what Ben talked through with a really clear foundation of how the numbers are organized, and then what Joe talked about with an intentional relationship between the things we can control that affect those results in the financials, and then we can build on that and let it come to life over time and have a space where we can constantly reiterate and recalibrate and stay on track. It's almost like introducing a forward, instead of just driving a car and looking in the rearview mirror, you finally have not just like the headlights on, but we actually have the GPS with different routes that we can pay attention to. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is great. I know it's like drinking from the fire hose. We're giving a lot. We will be sending all these resources. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And if you are wanting help on the accounting side of things, please, reach out to Ben or Joe. If you want help with like the CFO side, the strategic planning, we would be happy to hop on a call with you and walk through that cash flow mountain visual and just say, how does cash flow through your business right now? Where are you feeling too much runoff? Where could you add more? It's a lot to do in your own head. So, I mean, we would love to walk that through with you. Ben, how can people find you guys?
Yeah, folks can go through our website and get in touch with us, goodmeasurefinancial.com. And we'd love to have friendly chats. I mean, all the things that you just shared are wonderful resources, and they are the logical next conversations after getting your financial house in order. So goodmeasurefinancial.com. We'd love to chat with folks.
Great. And we're at Amplify.Business, and you can reach out to us there. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, any final thoughts? I have this slide up. I just wanted to highlight, as just practical next steps, like Brittany said, fire hose. But if there are just a few things that you could commit to as you are ending 2025 and you want to start 2026 and be more proactive and less reactive heading into the new year, beginning with that first exercise that Ben walked through and reviewing the checklist and beginning to translate, the new habits around, like Joe mentioned, the like setting scorecard, like what actually influences the financials, and then answering some of those questions that I walked through with the kind of year-end planning worksheet, the simple little VTO, which stands for Vision Traction Organizer, setting some of those bigger goals, understanding the big parts of your plan for 2026, and then just not being afraid of creating new habits around the way you interact with the numbers. Don't be afraid to, just get into the mess and start looking and trying to understand, are there bodies buried in the balance sheet like Ben was talking about? But just what can we learn by just looking and paying attention? And then what can we test in the next 30 days to see if we are able to make progress?
Yeah. And I think undergirding all this conversation is from, we've talked to Joe and Ben about this, and we talk about this all the time, but even as you're thinking about that cabin or that opportunities pond, and, Ben mentioned this, but that it really is so different for everybody. And we do care about people having that permission to say, like, what if you might not have to make, millions of dollars? Like, you really have to decide what is the thing that you're hoping for? What's your why? what does a life of meaning look like? And then all these numbers get to serve you. And you guys mentioned that as well, the Good Measure guys. But just that in the end, it really is about like, what do you hope for? What are you wanting? And then how do you let the numbers serve that, so that you're not just taking in sort of like the entrepreneurial culture of like just hustle and do more, and then things pass you by that you really care about. So I think that's some of the intention undergirding this. And did you guys have any other thoughts with that?
Yeah, I think that's super helpful, Brittany. Like, intention and intentionality is what this is all about. Like, don't let your numbers happen to you. Don't let your business happen to you. I love that you were talking about that earlier, Joe. I just think that's so helpful. I've lived that personally in a past life. I fight it regularly. Like, we don't want to let our businesses happen to us. You don't want to let your life happen to you. And so I love this. Like, what's one small thing we can do today to prevent that, or just to stay on track? And I'm taking intention. We'd say we don't want to let your numbers happen to you, but take control of your numbers and let them serve you. So it's been a joy to be able to have this conversation, and it's neat to be able to chat about this together, because I know we love serving people in very similar ways.
Yeah. Love it. Joe,
So one thing I would add to that, there's a quote from Abraham Lincoln who says, "If I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 4 hours sharpening my axe." And this is the sharpening of the axe going into 2026. So you owe it to yourself, to your family, to your employees, to your clients, to take the time to go through this. So the resources that we'll share, particularly the vision, the why, understanding where you want to take your business, you really owe it to yourself, and you need to consider it as part of the job of being the CEO, being the leader of your company, to take that time and communicate to yourself, why am I doing this? I have a limited amount of time on this earth. Am I doing something that's productive? Am I doing something that I enjoy? Just take that time. It's so valuable to carve out the time and understand where you want to go. Reach out to our companies. We'd love to support you in that, but at the very least, take our resources, and we hope that you are able to run a better business next year.
Love it.
Absolutely. I think it would just end on something that we say all the time is, you are not alone, because so often we sit with business owners who feel like there's some finance class I missed, or everybody else understands this and I don't. And you're just not meant to. You can only do so many things. If you're leading a business, invite somebody in, whether that's us, whether that's somebody in your life. Don't do it alone. Don't feel like you have to know everything. Like, you're already, you're running a business. So that's our invitation for 2026 is, start with intention. Don't do it alone. And we would love to be part of that conversation. So thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Good Measure crew. Ben, Joe, awesome to be with you guys. Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.
All right.
Everyone.
Bye.